Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go to my review of WCW's Bash at the Beach 1995. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is Ming versus Sting for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. I thought this was a good match to start Bash at the Beach 95. Back and forth matchup between Ming and Sting, with Sting keeping the pace of the match. But Sting ultimately hits a roll-up on Ming, pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time still WCW United States Heavyweight Champion, is Sting. Hats off to Sting for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Television Championship. It is Renegade versus Paul Orndorff. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Renegade and Orndorff, with Orndorff keeping the pace of the match. Renegade, though, ultimately hits a back suplex on Paul Orndorff, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, still WCW Television Champion, is the Renegade. Hats off to the Renegade for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Kamala. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Jim Duggan and Kamala, with Duggan and Kamala both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Kamala was keeping the pace of the match. Zodiac is here. He makes his way down to the ring. He ends up attacking Jim Duggan. Kamala then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Kamala. Hats off to Kamala for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Diamond Dallas Page versus Dave Sullivan. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between DDP and Sullivan, with Sullivan keeping the pace of the match. But DDP ultimately hits his signature Diamond Cutter on Sullivan, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Diamond Dallas Page. Hats off to DDP for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Nasty Boys versus Harlem Heat versus Robert Eaton and Steven Regal for the WCW Tag Team Championships. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth match with all teams involved, with the Nasty Boys keeping the pace of the match. But Harlem Heat ultimately pick up the victory and retain the WCW Tag Team Championships. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Ric Flair versus Randy Savage in a lumberjack match. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Flair and Savage, with Savage keeping the pace of the match. Flair and Savage both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Flair applying a figure 4 leg lock on Savage in the middle of the ring. Then the hold is broken, but Randy Savage ultimately hits his signature elbow drop off the top rope on Ric Flair, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Macho Man Randy Savage. Hats off to the Macho Man Randy Savage for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WCW's Bash at the Beach 1995. It is Hulk Hogan defending the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against Vader in a steel cage match. The match itself, it was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Hogan and Vader, with Hogan keeping the pace of the match. Hogan and Vader both exchange in the middle of the ring. Hogan then hits 2 leg drops on Vader in the middle of the ring. Hogan then goes to climb the cage, but Vader tries to stop him. But Hogan ultimately climbs over the cage, and your winner of the match, and at that time still WCW World Heavyweight Champion, is Hulk Hogan. A couple of things I'm going to say about Bash at the Beach 95 before I get out of here, man. This was a solid event. It really was. Couple of things I'm going to say about Bash at the Beach 95 that I actually enjoyed was, number one, this whole event was actually on the beach. Literally. There was no, like, crazy pyro or anything else like that. The entire match, or the entire pay-per-view, was on the beach. I believe it was Huntington Beach, California, if I'm not mistaken. And I honestly thought that was really cool, man, because, you know, you can see people on the beach that just walk up and watch this event and stuff like that. And it was really, you know, it was great for the fans at that time, especially if you're at Huntington Beach, California that day for the Bash at the Beach event in 1995. So I thought that was really cool. The match card itself, it wasn't entirely bad. Ming versus Sting to start Bash at the Beach 95, I thought was really interesting, considering that There was other matches they could have put as at the start, especially Jim Duggan versus Kamala. That could have definitely opened up Bash at the Beach 95, or DDP versus Dave Sullivan could also open up the show for Bash at the Beach. But instead, we got Ming versus Sting for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. It's a solid match with Sting picking up a victory, getting a roll up, and retaining the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. We got Renegade defending the television championship against Paul Orndorff, which I thought it was an okay matchup at best. And I stated this on my last pay-per-view that I did. Renegade, to me, is a knockoff of the Ultimate Warrior. Everything about Renegade was a knockoff to Ultimate Warrior. The move set, the face paint, the attire, the way that he carried the character, everything told me that was exactly Ultimate Warrior. Paul Orndorff, I think Paul Orndorff is a mystery for me as far as which part of his career was the best run. Was it WWE or WCW? And to be honest with you, I think it's a combination of both, man. To be honest with you, Paul Orndorff had a really decent career for himself in WCW. He was, television champion. He had great matches in WCW. And those are the people that he teamed up with. I mean, he teamed up with Paul Roma, a couple other WCW superstars at that time. And at this point, it was, towards the end of Orndorff's career. And, he really gave it his all, man, in my honest opinion, towards, the end of his in-ring career in WCW. Jim Duggan versus Kamala. It was an okay match. It was great to see Kamala. I think Kamala is severely underrated. Everything about Kamala was great. The gimmick, the way that, he would walk around the ring and stuff and kind of scare the fans, the face paint. And, he made a big, Kamala really made a big name for himself in the Memphis territory. And a lot of people don't realize that. But Kamala made a huge name for himself in the Memphis territories when pro wrestling was, territories. And it was great to see Kamala. It was also great to see Kamala teaming up with Kevin Sullivan at that time, the Taskmaster. So it was cool to see that and bring Kamala into the fold in WCW for a little bit of time. DDP and Dave Sullivan, it was one of those storylines that I could not stand. Dave Sullivan is just boring. 100% boring wrestler, man. I mean, the first time he came into WCW, into the fold of WCW, he was known as the Equalizer. Then they changed the name, and then he got into a storyline with Kevin Sullivan, and the rest is kind of history. But Dave Sullivan is just a boring wrestler to watch, man. I'm sorry. And, the other match, obviously, Ric Flair versus Randy Savage in a lumberjack match. They were calling it a lifeguard match, but really it was a lumberjack match. There was a bunch of WCW talent out there, ringside during this match. And if Flair fell out of the ring, they put him back into the ring. Same thing for Savage. So, in layman's terms, it was pretty much a lumberjack match. And then the main event, Hulk Hogan versus Vader. And like I told you guys before, man, a lot of the pay-per-views, especially towards, late 94, 95, going into early 96, a lot of the pay-per-views, main events, were pretty much surrounded by Hogan, Flair, Savage, and Vader. That was the four guys, the four pillars, if you will, that was going to main event regardless, whatever pay-per-view was going on between late 94 all the way up to early 96. And that's pretty much how it was. And you're not going to not put those guys in the main event. They are definitely main event caliber talent. But a lot of this pay-per-view did come down to the main event. And I would say the main event, and then, obviously Randy Savage and Ric Flair. But, even in the main event, you had Dennis Rodman ringside cheering on Hogan. They're in the middle of Huntington Beach, California, right on the beach. It was a great event. It was a really good event. But with that being said, I'm not going to give Bash at the Beach 95 a solid rating of a 10. If I had to give WCW Bash at the Beach 1995 a solid rating, I'm probably going to have to give it a 5.5 at best, based upon Flair versus Savage and Hogan versus Vader. So, like I said, I'm going to have to give WCW Bash at the Beach 1995 a solid 5.5 at best. But this is my review of WCW's Bash at the Beach 1995. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.